Okay, the reading for this week is the next part in our series on classical Chinese civilization and philosophy and culture. And today we'll be reading a series of oracle bone inscriptions. Oracle bones are sometimes called dragon bones, inscriptions from the late Shang Dynasty. So you will remember that the Shang Dynasty is from approximately 1554 BC to 1045 BC. And once, as always, I'll put the dates of the major dynasties of Chinese history in the description below. Make sure you memorize them if you haven't done so already. And there are 3 PDF worksheets for this assignment. I will combine them all into a single video and read them all here. They're very short, so this video shouldn't take too long. Oracle bone inscriptions of the late Shang Dynasty. On Childbearing is the first one that we'll read, and I'll start with the introduction about oracle bones or dragon bones, which were discovered around 1899, I think, as is mentioned here in the introduction. Here's the introduction. The oracle bone inscriptions translated below were written during the Shang Dynasty, 1554 to 1045 BC approximately. The Xiang people practiced divination by boring a series of pits into either a tortoise plastron, the bottom part of a tortoise shell, or a cattle scapula. The scapula is one of the bones inside the cattle. A hot bronze rod was applied, producing cracks, which were then interpreted as answers to questions, often expressed as a pair of 2 possible outcomes, so a lot of yes or no questions, that the king, the king, and or his diviner had posed. So they would ask it questions and then poke it with the prod and see what sort of lines or cracks were produced, and then interpret it accordingly. Sometimes the questions, a record of the divination, and occasionally even a record of the actual outcome, were inscribed on the plastron or scapula. Through such divinations, the Shang hoped to discover the causes of events, the will of their ancestors, and of their highest deity, Di, the Di of Shangdi, and the correct course of action to take when faced with difficult decisions. Discovered and translated beginning only in 1899, so there are several documentaries online if you're interested in this subject of the first archaeologists who discovered these ancient bone inscriptions, oracle bone inscriptions around 1899. These oracle bones are the earliest written records of Chinese civilization. The inscriptions give us a highly selective record of some of the concerns and events that were relevant to the elite class of the Shang kingdom. However, the only such Shang dynasty oracle bones discovered have been from the reigns of Wu Ding, who reigned 1198 to 1189 BC, and his successors. In other words, strictly speaking, China's written history begins with these inscriptions around 1200 BC. And they think that for many decades or even centuries, a lot of these oracle bone inscriptions were dug out of the ground, and the peasants or whoever found them did not understand the historical significance of them, and they used them to make Chinese medicine, and they consumed them. So most of these oracle bone inscriptions do not survive to the present day. All right, so here's the first from the series that I will read. There are 2 inscriptions here, oracle bone inscriptions of the late Shang Dynasty. The first 2 have to do with childbearing. And once again, these excerpts are taken from Sources of Chinese Tradition by William Theodore de Barry and Irene Bloom, Volume 1. I'll put the link to that book below so you can order it if you haven't done so already. Okay, 15a inscription, oracle bone inscription. Cracked making on Xiang, day 21. Cue divined, quote, Lady Hao's, a consort of Wu Ding, Lady Hao's childbearing will be good. Prognostication. The king read the cracks and said, if it be on a Ding day that she give birth, there will be prolonged luck. And then the verification is, after 31 days on Jiaying, day 51, she gave birth. It was not good. It was a girl. Okay, so notice that a lot of these oracle bone inscriptions are formulaic. They start with the divination, and then the prognostication, and then the verification. All right, so we see all 3 of those parts in this first inscription. And the verification was not good. It was a girl. They were hoping for a boy. 15b, Starts with the prognostication. The king read the cracks and said, quote, "If it be a ding day, childbearing, it will be good. If it be a gung day, childbearing, there will be prolonged luck. If it be a ren shu, day 59, childbearing day, it will not be lucky." Alright, so those are the two that we have on this first worksheet, and there are 3 questions about these. Question number 1, what do the inscriptions indicate about the relative status of males and females in the Xiang family structure? Okay, so remember that this is before Confucius appears on the scene, so Confucian ideas do not exist at this point. Keep in mind as you read this. But there are scholars, of course. Well, maybe not this far back in Chinese history, but there's still an obvious patriarchal hierarchy that exists here, and a certain gender relations that entails. Discuss that. Question number 2, what cultural characteristics would explain the desire for a male child? So again, a question about gender. And the third is, how does the concern expressed here compare to the ideals of other civilizations in other times and places? Okay, so this is the comparative cultural question that often appears on these sheets. Alright, now moving on to the second oracle bone inscriptions of the late Shang Dynasty. We have the same introduction, so I won't read it again. And here are the inscriptions. Number 8, crack making on Yi Wei, day 32. Gu divined, quote, "Father Yi, the 20th Shang king, Xiao Yi, the father of Wu Ding, is harming the king." So whoever this person named Father Yi, 20th Shang king, is harming the king. And the next one, 9a, is another divination. It was thus divined, quote, "Grandfather Ding, the 15th king, father of Xiao Yi, is harming the king." So another divination that says, that warns that somebody is trying to harm or is harming the king. 9b, another divination. It is not Grandfather Ding who is harming the king. So it's not Grandfather Ding. In 9a, it was Grandfather Ding who is harming the king. Now it's not Grandfather Ding harming the king. And 10 is another divination. There is a sick tooth. It is not Father Yi. And keep in mind that the kanji for divination, a very simple kanji that just looks like this. I'll write the kanji below, but it comes from this oracle bone inscription custom. Divination, or inscription 10, divination. There is a sick tooth. It is not Father Yi, Xiao Yi as above, who is harming him. Alright, and the final one, 19a, crack making on Renzi, day 49. Zheng divined, quote, "It would be a settlement. D will not obstruct but approve. Third moon." Alright, rather cryptic. There are many more actually. There's 7 more here on this worksheet. I'll read them all. 19b, crack making on Guizhou, day 50. Zheng divined, quote, "If we do not build a settlement, D will approve." Inscription 20a, crack making on Xinqiu, day 38. Chui divined, quote, "D approves the king doing something." Inscription 20b, divined, quote, "D does not approve the king doing something." Inscription 22a, divined, "It is D who is harming our harvest, second moon." Inscription 22b, "It is not D who is harming our harvest." Alright, so a lot of times you see a divination that has an affirmation of something followed by the opposite. We'll have to investigate why this is. Inscription 23, divination, quote, "The Fang, the enemy, named the Fang, are harming and attacking us. It is D who orders them to make disaster for us, third moon." 24a is divination. "Because the Fang are harming and attacking us, we will raise men." And 24b is another divination. "It is not D who orders the Fang to make disaster for us." Okay, and the questions here, 3 questions. Reading the inscriptions, how would you describe the relationship between deceased ancestors and their living descendants? Okay, what is the relationship between these 2 groups of people, the dead and their ancestors and their descendants? We'll discuss that in class some more. Question number 2, who is D and what is his relationship with the Shang rulers? And finally, question 3, what are some of the concerns of the Xiang elite as reflected in these inscriptions? Are these concerns unique to them? And the final PDF worksheet that we have is this third one, Oracle Bone Inscriptions of the late Shang Dynasty on warfare. So these are the ones that specifically have to do with wars and whether we should attack, whether somebody's about to attack us, and so forth. Inscription number 6 on Ding Mao, day 4. So notice that the days are not numbered, but they have names. You see this in Japanese too, with mutsu and the months and all that too. That custom comes from China, of course. On the Ding Mao day, day 4, there was this divination. Quote, if the king joins with Zhi Guo, an important Shang general, to attack the Shaofang, he will receive assistance. Okay, so obviously they're deciding whether they should attack, and this is giving some positive advice that encourages the attack to take place. And then it says, cracked in the temple of ancestor Yi, the 12th king, 5th moon. Inscription 23 is another divination. Quote, the Fang enemy are harming and attacking us. It is Di who orders them to make disaster for us, 3rd moon. Inscription 24, another divination. Because the Fang are harming and attacking us, we will raise men. Okay, so the Fang has appeared several times here. We'll look up the Fang later in class and see who exactly this enemy is and what their relationship is to the people of Shang. 24, be divined. It is not Di who orders the Fang to make disaster for us. So again, we see an assertion followed by its negation for some reason. Di was in part a god of battle. Okay, here's some explanation about Di. In part a god of battle. Some 20 divinations end with the incantatory formula, Di will confer assistance on us. And when the context was specified, Di's assistance always involved warfare, as in, and here's the last inscription, number 25, crack making on Jia Chen, day 41. Zheng divined, quote, if we attack the Ma Fang, another enemy group, Di will confer assistance on us. Okay, so the god of battle Di will confer assistance on us if we attack the Ma Fang, 1st moon, and we can assume that the attack actually took place the following day or the following week or whenever. All right, and here are the last 2 questions about these this set of inscriptions, and it's question number 1. What is Di's role in war? So he's the god of war, obviously, but what active role does he play in this? And the final question, what information can you glean and what conclusions can you draw about warfare and the Shang's relations with their neighbors from these inscriptions? All right, so keep in mind that there's not much historical evidence from this period aside from these inscriptions and some pottery and other artifacts. So we have to interpret them and extrapolate whatever we can from the available evidence. All right, that is all for now. We'll discuss more about these oracle bone or dragon bone inscriptions of the late Shang dynasty in class. I will see you then. Goodbye.